Clarity, organisation and engagement are three fundamental principles that are essential to having an effective classroom climate. In the next video, we are going to focus on two sets of skills that are essential to ensuring that. One, having routines, and two, having clear expectations. In relation to engagement, if you're wasting time dealing with low-level behaviour around things that could have a set of consistent routines, like for example how the children enter the classroom, the way books are handed out, perhaps the way you deal with situations like questioning and other things that are standard practice, you'll find that engagement isn't possible and isn't easy to achieve. In the first clip, we're going to look at a teacher who's planned a routine and taught it to the children so that he can have a flexible desk layout in his classroom, so that he can move swiftly and easily from whole class teaching to group work, so that that transition is seamless and time isn't wasted.
Thanks very much for coming in so sensibly and so quickly. We've got a lot to get through this lesson. One thing I want to do is I want to change the layout of the room, because later on in the lesson I'd like to do some group work. So I know you're used to doing this, but I just want to remind you of what I expect. I expect you, please, to stand behind your tables in a minute, and when we're ready, on my instruction, you're going to move the chairs to the back of the room, okay? And then we'll move the tables into the cafe formation, okay? So you're sitting in your groups, all right? And then, if the usual chair monitors, if you can give the chairs out, pencils, equipment monitors, if you can help out as well, please, I'd be extremely grateful. I'd like to do this quickly, and I'd like to do it sensibly, and I'd like to do it quietly, because there's other classrooms working around us. Okay?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Okay. Stand behind your chairs, please. Let's see if you're ready to go. Excellent. Thank you. Let's get going. Put the chairs to the back, please. Right, thank you very much for doing that. Thank you for doing that so quickly and so sensibly. Please sit down. Could you give out the exercise books? Thank you.
So Howell, I know you've got a number of routines that you are consistent about in your classroom. I'd like to ask you about some of those. So how about children entering the classroom, for example?
I get the children to enter the classroom sensibly, quickly and quietly so that we can begin work straight away. The children come in an orderly fashion, they stand behind their chairs, and when I'm satisfied that we're all in, we're all ready, then they can sit down.
So that's something you've actually taught them early on in the year, and then you apply it consistently thereafter?
Absolutely. It will have been something that I did with the children in the first lesson, so that we could establish it quickly, and then it just becomes normal, a routine.
Great. So what about taking the register? What's your routine around that?
Sometimes taking the register, getting silence at the beginning of a lesson, taking the register can slow things down. So what I tend to do is I'll take the register once the children are working on an activity, perhaps copying down the lesson objectives or doing an activity that we've set up.
And that comes back to what we've learned before about making sure you get the children engaged immediately in something rather than delaying the start of the learning, perhaps with a starter activity or an interesting question.
That's right. Yeah.
Great. So What about tidying up? Because I know you do a lot of activity and there's often lots of things out on the desk. What's your routine for that?
Everyone has a responsibility, and it might be we need to move some tables, so there will be children who are responsible for the tables, for the chairs, for the stationery boxes, and also children are obviously responsible for their own exercise books and their pens and so on. So the tidy up can happen quickly if children know what's expected of them. So again, make that plain early on.
And do you have a routine for the exiting and leaving of the classroom at the end of a lesson as well?
Very much so. I want the room to be tidy and ready for the next lesson, so I do make sure that I give children enough time to do this. Sometimes it can be rushed and then it's a mess. So very much it's an important part of the lesson. I leave time for it, maybe a few minutes towards the end, and I will say, let us now make sure that everything's tidied up. Can we make sure there isn't anything that's out that shouldn't be? And then we stand up behind our chairs, and when I'm satisfied that everyone's ready to leave, I will dismiss them, maybe a table or a row at a time.
We've discovered and we've learned from the clips and discussions with our teacher that having a clear set of routines is a really important way of establishing your classroom climate. And rules and routines help you with processes and procedures that are standard, the things that will happen consistently over time. A second factor and another set of important skills is around your expectations, and having very high expectations that are communicated clearly and effectively. Anything the children do, and anything they will achieve, and anything that has an output can have expectations around it. Everything from written work and what you expect to see when they do written work, through to the way in which you expect them to engage with questions, apply themselves in discussion, or your expectations about their commitment over time to their own individual learning. In the next series of examples, we're going to see some ways in which a teacher can establish high expectations and explain them to the children.
I'm going to ask you to prepare a presentation using those facts and using the knowledge that you have acquired over the last 4 or 5 lessons. You're going to put together your learning, okay? And you're going to present it to me, and you're going to present it to the rest of the class. I'm going to give you not a lot of time to do this, but the majority of this lesson, okay? So we're going to do this presentation, and this is what I expect to see. I want to see positive group work. I know I shouldn't have to say that, but sometimes when I'm setting up group work, occasionally some groups don't work very well because they don't listen to each other, because they don't share with each other. So I want to see you doing that really well today. I expect it of you. So I look forward to seeing that. I want you to take the facts that I've shared with you. I want you to take those facts and I want you to do something with them. I don't really just want you to read out the things I've given you. I want you to embellish on the facts. I want you to say more. I want you to bring in what you've learned before, okay? I need you to plan carefully. Planning a presentation. Some people think they can just stand up and get away with it and make it up. You cannot afford to do that. I will be assessing these presentations. And do you know what? I'm also assessing how you work together when you're preparing them. So I expect to see some great work. I want you to make sure that everyone in your group contributes. We shouldn't really have a situation where there's someone who's able to opt out. And that's quite hard for your group down here where there's 4 of you. Okay, so each of you take a role. Okay? Make sure you've got a job to do. I want you to make sure that during your presentation, and I'll remind you of these things, that you speak clearly. Because you may have a fantastic presentation on paper, you've mind mapped, you've come up with lists, you've looked back in your books, you may have done all that, but if you stand here and actually mumble and are not clear, then of course that's going to be disappointing. And you do not get extra points or extra marks for having a really, really bright PowerPoint, okay? Or a bright presentation that actually has no meaning. It is the information that I am interested in. So please present it in an interesting way. That is what I expect. And when we've watched the presentations, I'll tell you what I think.
So I can see how you were really clear explaining your expectations at the beginning. What's going to happen in the next clip? What are we going to see?
You're going to see, after the presentations have taken place, I'm using my expectations essentially as a success criteria, and I'm going to feed back to the children from the point of view of whether they've managed to meet those expectations that I have of them. You'll see with the first group that they have done and they've surpassed them, and they were excellent. And in the second group, they were a little bit disappointing. So I keep referring the children back to the expectations so they understand how important they are.
And of course what we know about praise is, praise can be effective, but sometimes it can be inefficient. So it's important to be praising, isn't it, in a way that is deserved, appropriate and specific. But when you find times when there isn't praise, it's important not to do that or to point out why praise isn't being given. So how else do you do that in the classroom?
With praise, it's like you say, it's very important not to be too general and reward children with a comment, for example, when in fact they don't really deserve it. You shouldn't really praise children for being there. You need to praise them for attainment, for progress and for good work. When I've used some, for example with homework, when I'm feeding back on homework to children, I will praise them if I've seen progress, and I will do that as a written comment. I will perhaps give them a sticker in their book, as well as a grade, but they will see an honest reaction from myself to the work that they've handed in. Similarly, if the work is disappointing, then they won't get praise, but they will get understanding and supportive comments. But the onus of development and progress will be placed back on them because they have not met my expectations.
And that's the end.
Well done. Well done. That was very, very good. And at the start of the project, if you like, I did demonstrate to you what I wanted to see, and you've really shown that well. You've shown real positive group work, and that's what I expected you to do, but you have done it really well. Your group have come up, as other groups have as well today, you've come up with some really, really good ideas. You haven't just relied on what I've told you. You've developed what I've told you, and I'm very, very, well, I'm pleased with it, but also you've met my expectations and gone past them. You've also used the facts appropriately. I don't think you missed anything out, actually, in terms of those key dates. I think you got them all in. Obviously, you'd planned carefully. They'd planned carefully because you could tell it was fairly slick, that. It was, in the amount of time that you've had, you've been able to put that together well. And I was pleased to see that all of you contributed. I know that sometimes, you know, not all of you want to speak up and speak out, but you did, and you did it very clearly, which was the next expectation I had. I'm very pleased with that as well. I thought the illustrations that you got, I hadn't seen some of those pictures before that you got off the web. I hadn't seen those images before, and I'm the history teacher. I thought that was really great. That was really good in terms of making it interesting. And I could tell looking around the room that your peers in the room, they were interested as well. And it was presented in an interesting way, particularly that last picture, which I've used on mine as well. And that picture is the King of the River Thames offering up diseases to the City of London. It's a lovely picture. So it's quite an apt one for you to choose at the end there. So in terms of my expectations, you really met them, and you went beyond them as well today. So well done.